Welcome to Costco. I love you. Idiocracy wasn't just a satirical comedy about a man waking up in a dumbed-down future. It was a brutal mirror held up to American culture, one the studio barely wanted you to see. Behind the goofy gags were budget collapses, botched marketing campaigns, furious corporate pushback, and a director who thought his movie might never be released at all. The production faced hostile test screenings, distributors who sabotaged it, and even lawsuits threatening to bury it. What audiences didn't know was that the film's warnings about consumerism, corporate power, and political decay almost got silenced before the world ever saw them. Today, we'll uncover 20 shocking facts about Idiocracy they tried to hide. And wait until you hear the bonus fact. It involves a secret that makes the film's ending eerily prophetic. Stay tuned, let's dive in. The studio barely released it. Fox was so uncomfortable with Idiocracy that they essentially dumped it. The film was released in just 7 cities, without trailers, posters, or press screenings. Studio executives feared the satire was too raw, too unflattering to major advertisers like Starbucks, Carl's Jr., and Costco, brands directly lampooned in the movie. The decision crippled its box office run, limiting it to a paltry $495,000 domestic gross. It wasn't incompetence, it was intentional suppression. Audiences didn't know it existed until years later when word of mouth and DVDs turned it into a cult hit. The truth? The studio didn't want the film to succeed. It was too close to reality. The real joke wasn't on the characters, it was on corporate Hollywood itself. Luke Wilson thought it would be his biggest hit. When Luke Wilson signed on, he believed Idiocracy would be a breakout cultural comedy, similar to Office Space. The script felt fresh, the satire biting, and Mike Judge's reputation solid. But during filming, Wilson began to notice troubling signs: delayed schedules, weak studio enthusiasm, and murmurs that test screenings were tanking. He later admitted in interviews that he was shocked at how poorly the movie was treated upon release. For an actor riding high after Legally Blonde and Old School, this was a devastating blow. Wilson wasn't just playing an everyman lost in a dumb future. He was watching a smart project get buried in the present. His disappointment mirrored the film's core theme: intelligence being ignored in favor of the lowest common denominator. The Starbucks joke almost got them sued. One of the most infamous running gags in Idiocracy was Starbucks evolving into a chain offering sexual favors instead of coffee. Corporate lawyers went ballistic. Starbucks reportedly threatened legal action, forcing the production to tread carefully. The gag remained, but it was toned down to avoid a courtroom battle. This was just one example of how Judge's satire struck too close to home for real-world brands. Carl's Jr. was also furious at being depicted as a predatory corporation feeding junk food to a passive population. The pushback wasn't just symbolic, it was corporate censorship trying to protect billion-dollar reputations. The fact that these companies reacted so defensively only proved Judge's point. The future wasn't far off. It was already here. Filming was chaotic and underfunded. On the surface, Idiocracy looks like a silly low-budget comedy, but the production was grueling. Fox gave Mike Judge just $2.4 million, tiny compared to most studio comedies at the time. Sets had to be cobbled together from leftover props, bargain bin costumes, and even repurposed sports stadiums. The Costco scenes were shot inside an abandoned hangar, filled with cheap signage and CGI touch-ups. Judge constantly fought to stretch every dollar, often clashing with the studio for more time and resources. Crew members later said they admired Judge's vision, but worried it was impossible to execute with so little support. The irony? A movie about a decaying society was itself made under conditions of neglect and underinvestment. It wasn't just art imitating life, it was life imitating art. Test screenings were a disaster. When Fox first tested Idiocracy, audiences were confused, offended, and sometimes angry. The crude jokes about corporate control and low intelligence didn't land in 2005 the way they do now. Executives panicked. They demanded cuts, reshoots, and even considered shelving the project entirely. Judge refused to compromise too much, insisting the film's bite was the point. But the disastrous screening sealed the movie's fate. Instead of marketing it as a bold satire, Fox buried it as an unreleasable oddity. Ironically, those same scenes that horrified test audiences are now considered prophetic. From Brondo has electrolytes to the House of Representin', the satire resonates stronger with every passing year. What once looked like a failure now looks like fortune-telling. Mike Judge predicted streaming culture. When Idiocracy hit home video, it didn't just gain traction, it exploded. Mike Judge had argued all along that the movie would find its audience outside traditional theaters. He was right. DVDs, late-night cable reruns, and eventually streaming gave the film its cult status. Judge himself admitted that the dump release might have been a blessing in disguise, because word of mouth created a grassroots rebellion against studio neglect. In many ways, Idiocracy was a preview of the digital age, a movie about mindless consumption that survived thanks to smarter audiences who hunted it down. What Fox saw as a dead project became one of the most quoted comedies of its era. The irony? A film mocked as stupid became a case study in how new distribution models could rescue buried art from studio sabotage. Terry Crews nearly didn't get the role of President Camacho. Terry Crews' performance as President Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew. Herbert Camacho is legendary, loud, absurd, and unforgettable. But he almost didn't get the part. At the time, Crews was still building his career and worried the role was too outlandish. Mike Judge pushed hard, convinced Crews could embody the insane energy of a professional wrestler-turned-president. On set, Crews improvised much of Camacho's speechifying, drawing on his past as an NFL player and his natural showmanship. The result was so over the top that some executives feared it would alienate audiences. Today, Camacho is one of the film's most enduring symbols, an outrageous caricature that feels less like parody and more like prophecy. Without Crews' fearless performance, Idiocracy might have lacked the absurd, frightening heart that anchors its vision of America's future. Maya Rudolph. Filmed in constant fear, Maya Rudolph played Rita, a prostitute who becomes Luke Wilson's unlikely ally. But the role came with unexpected anxieties. Rudolph was nervous about how the film would portray her character, especially since Judge insisted on playing the satire straight, not softening the edges. Some of her scenes were filmed in chaotic environments, including dusty, poorly ventilated warehouses dressed as futuristic slums. Crew members recall her being a consummate professional, even when uncomfortable. What audiences didn't know, Rudolph feared the film might damage her career if it bombed, or worse, never got released. She later admitted the role was a gamble, but the cult success of Idiocracy cemented her as one of the film's most grounded and human performances. Rita wasn't just comic relief, she was the soul of Judge's bleak vision. The fake ads were too real. From Brondo the Thirst Mutilator to Carl's Jr. automated kiosks, the film's fake ads looked frighteningly authentic. That wasn't an accident. Mike Judge hired real commercial designers to create the logos, branding, and ad campaigns as if they were real-world products. Some of the ad agencies took the assignment so seriously that executives reviewing the dailies thought Judge had snuck in actual product placements. The detail work gave the movie a disturbingly believable texture, making its dystopia feel uncomfortably close to home. Years later, energy drink companies and fast food chains would roll out real campaigns eerily similar to Idiocracy's parodies. What was meant as absurd exaggeration became mainstream advertising strategy. It wasn't just satire anymore. It was prophecy disguised as marketing. The film's marketing department mutinied. By the time Idiocracy was ready for release, Fox's marketing team wanted nothing to do with it. They argued there was no way to sell a movie that insulted its own potential customers. Internal disputes broke out, with some executives insisting it be pushed to DVD immediately. Others recommended burying it with no promotion at all. In the end, the mutiny won. No posters, no trailers, no real ad campaign. Mike Judge described it as the quietest release I've ever seen. The result? A film destined to fail financially, but succeed culturally. Audiences discovered it not because of marketing hype, but because they were told not to. And that's why you should go ahead and like and subscribe. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones Hollywood tries to bury. Real scientists were horrified. Mike Judge wanted Idiocracy to be funny, but he also wanted its dystopia to feel plausible. He consulted scientists and sociologists during development, asking what might happen if intelligence declined while consumerism thrived. Some of their responses were so bleak that Judge toned them down for the script. After release, educators and scientists who saw the film admitted they were rattled. The movie's portrayal of declining literacy, failing infrastructure, and corporate dominance wasn't just a joke, it echoed real academic warnings. One sociologist even called it the most terrifying documentary never made. Judge laughed at the comment, but admitted it struck a nerve. The film was packaged as satire, yet experts saw something darker, a disturbingly accurate forecast of social collapse. The laughter wasn't comfort, it was nervous recognition. The extras were told to act stupid. Literally, one of the strangest parts of filming involved directing extras. Judge wanted a future where everyone had regressed intellectually. Instead of traditional acting notes, extras were told to slouch, mumble, and look confused at everything. Some background performers later said it was the most bizarre instruction they'd ever received. A few took it too far, deliberately bumping into walls or misusing props during takes. Judge encouraged it, capturing spontaneous chaos that added to the movie's texture. What looked like slapstick was carefully engineered idiocy. The result was a world that felt broken down to its bones, where even background characters reinforced the satire. The extras didn't just fill space, they embodied decay. Without them, the film's world might have looked like parody. With them, it looked terrifyingly real. The president's speech was almost cut. Terry Crews' show-stopping address as President Camacho nearly didn't make it into the final cut. Studio executives argued it was too long, too chaotic, and too offensive. They wanted Judge to trim it down, worried audiences would walk out. Judge refused, insisting Crews' performance was the key to understanding the film's satire of leadership. The scene was eventually kept, but under protest. Today, it's one of the most quoted moments in the movie. Crews himself has said it's the role he's most recognized for, even years later. Cutting it would have gutted the film's commentary on spectacle-driven politics. What executives saw as excess was actually the heart of the satire, a world where entertainment replaced governance. The speech wasn't just a gag, it was prophecy in full technicolor. Brawndo became a real drink. The fictional Brawndo the Thirst Mutilator started as a parody of energy drinks. But in 2007, an entrepreneur licensed the brand and released an actual beverage under the name. Sold in neon green cans with slogans like, "It's got what plants crave," the drink became a cult novelty item. For a brief moment, fiction bled into reality. Fans of Idiocracy lined up to buy it, thrilled to consume satire-turned product. The irony was brutal. Judge had mocked consumerism, only to see his creation literally consumed. Some critics called it a marketing stunt that proved the film's point. The real Brawndo eventually faded from shelves, but not before cementing Idiocracy's strange cultural afterlife. The parody became prophecy, and the joke became something you could actually drink. The cinematographer hated the look. Idiocracy's visual style was divisive, even among the crew. Cinematographer Tim Surstedt, known for comedies like Office Space, reportedly disliked the cheap futuristic look forced by budget restrictions. Sets were bare, costumes garish, and props intentionally tacky. Surstedt felt it undermined his craft, but Judge argued that the ugliness was part of the satire. They clashed over lighting and camera setups, with Judge pushing for an intentionally overlit TV-like feel. The result was a future that looked mass-produced and disposable, exactly as Judge intended. Surstedt later admitted he wasn't proud of the aesthetic, but fans embraced it as another layer of commentary. What felt like compromise at the time became part of the movie's signature. The future wasn't sleek and shiny, it was cheap, dumb, and disposable. Fox wanted to rename the movie. Executives at Fox hated the title Idiocracy. They argued it sounded insulting and would scare off audiences. Several alternatives were floated, including bland, forgettable titles that stripped the satire of its edge. Mike Judge fought back, insisting the title was the soul of the project. Changing it would be like declawing the film before release. The battle over the title became symbolic of the entire production. Judge pushing for sharp commentary, the studio demanding something safer. In the end, Judge won the argument, but lost the war. The studio kept the title, but refused to market it. It was a hollow victory. Ironically, the very name executives despised later became shorthand in political and cultural debates. People didn't say, "That's like a dumb comedy." They said, "That's Idiocracy." The White House set was a recycling center. The futuristic White House wasn't a Hollywood backlot. It was a gutted recycling plant in Texas. The crew dressed the cavernous space with cheap red, white, and blue props to create President Camacho's chaotic palace. Heat and fumes from leftover industrial waste made filming miserable. Some extras complained of headaches, while the sound team battled echoes bouncing off the metal walls. Judge loved the location's raw, dilapidated look, which fit perfectly with the movie's dystopia. But for the crew, it was a nightmare. Equipment overheated, and continuity was constantly broken by industrial noise outside. Still, the scrappy location gave Idiocracy its authentic, decayed texture. The White House wasn't a monument of power, it was a trash heap decorated with streamers. That contrast said more than any line of dialogue ever could. Dax Shepard struggled to stay in character. As Frito, the sleazy lawyer turned reluctant sidekick, Dax Shepard delivered one of his most bizarre performances. But behind the scenes, he found it hard to keep a straight face. Shepard later admitted that he broke character constantly, especially during scenes with Terry Crews. His laughter forced multiple retakes, frustrating the already tight shooting schedule. Mike Judge, however, encouraged Shepard's looseness, believing it gave Frito his unpredictable energy. The actor improvised several lines, some of which made the final cut. Ironically, Shepard, who once worried the role might stall his career, has said it's one of the performances fans mentioned to him the most. The bumbling, cowardly lawyer wasn't just comic relief. He was a stand-in for every self-serving opportunist in modern society. Shepard's struggle created chaos, but also authenticity. The film predicted real-world politics. When Idiocracy premiered, President Camacho was seen as a cartoon exaggeration. But over the years, audiences began drawing eerie parallels between Camacho's antics and real-world leaders. Mike Judge has been asked repeatedly if he predicted the future. His response? "I never thought it would be this bad." Political commentators and journalists now routinely reference the film in serious debates about democracy and leadership. What was dismissed as over-the-top comedy in 2006 has been reframed as an accidental prophecy. The movie didn't just age well, it became a lens through which people understood cultural decline. Judge once said he hoped the film would remain a joke. Instead, it became a warning label. The scariest part wasn't the exaggeration, it was how quickly reality caught up. The studio tried to block international release. As badly as Fox treated Idiocracy in the US, its international rollout was even worse. Executives feared that foreign audiences wouldn't get the satire, or worse, they would. Several countries received no theatrical release at all, with the film dumped directly to DVD. Others had heavily edited versions, trimming corporate references that might offend sponsors. Fans overseas only discovered the film through imports and pirated copies, which ironically helped fuel its cult status. For a movie about the dangers of global corporate culture, being smothered by those very forces was almost poetic. By trying to bury Idiocracy, the studio only made it more infamous. Abroad, the film wasn't just seen as a comedy, it was read as a warning about American culture itself. The censorship backfired spectacularly. Mike Judge hid a secret ending. Few fans know that Mike Judge originally planned an alternate ending. In it, Joe, Luke Wilson, delivers a hopeful speech about rebuilding intelligence, only to be drowned out by a loud commercial blaring across the city. The bleak punchline? Even after saving the world, corporate noise still ruled. Fox rejected the scene as too depressing. Judge quietly filmed it anyway, but never released it. The footage remains locked away, whispered about in interviews. If it ever surfaced, it would confirm what Judge feared most. Intelligence might survive, but it would always struggle to be heard. The fact that this darker ending was cut only makes the film's legacy stronger. Idiocracy didn't just predict the future, it nearly told us outright that we might not escape it. And that's it. 20 shocking facts plus one bonus truth about Idiocracy. What started as a buried satire turned into a cultural prophecy. From lawsuits to lost endings, the chaos behind the scenes mirrors the chaos on screen. If you learned something new today, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. And remember, in a world full of noise, sometimes the smartest thing is to pay attention.